Can you all hear me? Yeah. So I'm getting started because I know they want to get through their long grand routes, and I'm really excited, looking forward to this. I've been listening to Matt Gotthole and Rob Walter on their podcast, Pediatricians podcast, on my iTunes for the last few months, and I've really enjoyed their episodes, and I've seen them evolve from novice broadcasters to really pretty swabby, well-rounded podcasts. At the same time, if you don't know, Matt's originally from Franklin and Marshall College, and then he went to originally from Camden, New Jersey, went to Franklin and Marshall College and did his training up in the non-existent Hahnemann, and then actually did his residency here in Delaware at the Medical Center of Delaware and in DuPont and all that. And Rob Walter comes to us from Chicago, originally from New York, Long Island.
He wishes.
And then he did his training over in Northwestern University, followed up with medical school in Northwestern, and then residency. That was residency for pediatrics, and then eventually found his way back down to this area. And they're both private pediatricians. You guys know them pretty well, but just welcome them and let's hear about what they got to teach us.
All right, we usually do this in front of 0 people, so this is a huge crowd. I also want to just
we just increased exponentially from our
make
normal
the point
audience.
that Matt's from the Pine Barrens.
No,
He's a piney from South Jersey, which comes up a lot. But thanks, Jem. Thanks, Steve Epps, who couldn't be here for
purposefully
inviting us also.
So we started this endeavor, I guess it was last spring or so. I had the idea to have a podcast, I guess a couple of years ago, because I started to listen to podcasts to kind of trickle away my time on my commute from Middletown up to Wilmington, where I work most days. So it's about a 45-minute commute. I stumbled across podcasts and really was enamored with the medium. Something I could turn off and on at my whim. I could continue a story, and so started to percolate this idea. Initially, I talked to my partner, Dr. Hondashane, about it, and he wisely balked at the idea, having young kids and lots of other things to do with his life. And then Rob heard about it, and he said, "Yeah, let's go ahead and do this."
We're actually doing Tai Chi together, which I quit.
Yeah,
it's way too slow.
Shocker.
Way too slow.
But so that's how most of this evolved. So as Rob said, we've been up and running now for a while, not quite a year. But so our website is podcastpediatricians.com. Our podcast can be downloaded from a variety of different sources, from iTunes. You just have to put in either Podcast Pediatricians or Rob Walter or Matt Gotthole, and it pops up. It's also available through other mediums like Stitcher and Google Play and TuneIn and YouTube, even on Facebook. So.
Right. So we're going to do this as a typical episode. Hopefully be a little time questions at the end. Cost us $1.99. We own this song.
We own this song.
We took the beeper sound out because Amy Chang said it gave her post-traumatic stress disorder. And Laura did too.
This music? Oh, it was Rob's.
I love the beeper.
I hated the beeper. No.
I know. That's why I put it in there.
Yeah.
So welcome to the podcast Pediatricians. I'm Rob Walter.
And I'm Matt Gotthole. We pediatricians are a dying breed. We independent pediatricians. Between us, we have about 50 years of experience. And our goal with our podcast has really been to educate and hopefully to an extent entertain our fellow pediatricians and also savvy parents. We do have a disclaimer, and our disclaimer is that we're sharing our own personal opinions on pediatric care. Always talk to your own pediatric caregiver about your child. Pediatric caregivers should always consult expert guidelines and consider their own community standards of care.
So from high atop Caesar Rodney Square, or you stay from the Christiana Hospital, it's the Podcast Pediatricians Potpourri Christiana Care Edition. Today, some highlights from seasons 1 or 2, plus some previews of upcoming episodes. You can see some of the main things. We started with sleep, and we really like to talk about poop. We'll hit that a little bit today, and strep, and we'll give some for our latest episode on nosebleeds and POT. and added a few Christiana. We thought more Christiana-friendly topics of Frenotomies and baby-friendly sad mommy. Nice to have David Paul in the audience to hear that. Anybody listen to podcasts in the audience? Okay, so just a quick primer. If you have an iPhone, especially, you just put look for the podcast, which is this purple icon, and then when you go into that, you hit search and then type in Podcast Pediatricians. You see our logo, and you press on it, and you can download past episodes and again marvel on how smart and witty we are, and please tell your colleagues. He's not here, but we want to say a second to kind of dedicate this to, and he's not dead, but this is to Chuck Bean, who's retiring at the end of this month after 40 years of really saving our behind.
Yeah. I mean, Chuck's been respected for a long time for his knowledge, but that knowledge is really coupled with compassion and empathy, and really has been a model for the pair of us, and we think probably the entire pediatric community for many, many years. One of the things that comes to mind when we think about Chuck is, you know, the whole idea that the measure of a man is the effect that he has on other people, and for Chuck, it certainly has been voluminous, to say the least. So we
Absolutely.
we honor Chuck.
Oh yeah, well if he was here, we were gonna get down and we were gonna. All right.
We're not worthy. Nice. You have a suit, so you're not gonna kneel.
Exactly. Yeah, I have a suit. Speaking of that, I have a tie, Disney tie. Who is that?
The snowman guy.
Doesn't even know who he's a pediatrician. Doesn't even. And then, of course, what I have to see every time I'm with Matt is Matt's fashion choice. Come on out from that podium, Matt. So, and I got 2 Christmas presents for Matt he hasn't seen. I'm going to preview them today in honor of his fashion choice. 2 T-shirts. On the right, now as pediatricians, we know that condoms only have about 86% effective rate in regular use, 14% failure rate in regular use, and birth control pills really 5% failure rate in regular use. And LARCs, long-acting reproductive contraception, is 99+%. But the only contraception that's 100% is it's working, right, Matt?
Haven't had a job in 19 years. Yeah. So we thought that we'd start out with something really both basic and topical, which is the subject of sleep. So this is the Greek god Hypnos. So when we think about sleep and how much we value it and how much it's changed throughout history, from the beginning of recorded time, sleep's really played a singular role in most cultures, and indeed even in most religions. So it used to be seen as a connection to the divine world. So as I said, this is the Greek god of sleep, Hypnos. He has a son, and his son, Morpheus. Morpheus is the god of dreams, and of course also the guy from whom we derive the word morphine. So sleep, as I mentioned, has really changed a lot. In pre-industrial times, sleep was really broken down for most cultures into 2 separate periods at night. There was a first sleep, and this is mentioned actually in Odysseus, the first sleep, and then oftentimes people are up for a few hours and then went back to sleep again a little bit later in the night. That's when they had sex
during the
midterm, and made food and did various other things. But so it's really changed an awful lot, and really what ultimately seemed to change the way that we look at sleep was the invention of artificial light. So this came about actually as early as the 14th century. The first public lamp was hung in Paris in 1318, and then by 1667, during the reign of Louis XV, the 14th actually, who was the Sun King, Paris became the world's first artificial light capital, artificial lights on scale. And so by the dawn of the 20th century, Paris had over 50,000 different gas street lamps. So you take this and you combine this with the Industrial Revolution. This, by the way, is Thomas Edison.
Named after Con Edison.
Named after Con Edison, that's right. And so artificial light, really what ended up happening was it allowed humanity to start to, for lack of a better term, colonize the night. And so now there was no longer this period of time that had to be downtime. Now that was, time not spent working was time lost, and our whole concept of sleep had really changed dramatically at this point. And this was around the time when sleep started to take on this sense of we don't need sleep. Sleep's for babies. We can work 24/7. And that, unfortunately, that type of a mindset still oftentimes spills over into our common times. That sleep is indeed a waste of time.
President Trump gets 4 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah, that's right.
Just
very macho not to sleep. But all this got translated into our current times through the invention of artificial light. So why sleep important? Well, this is just a basic summary of it. This is your average teenage boy. And as you can see, there are all different types of things that sleep has an impact on, or more clearly, sleep deprivation has an impact on. Everything from growth to reaction time to increasing the aspects of various forms of heart disease. And it's a miserable thing not to get enough sleep. I think we can all speak to that. I think we've all suffered through this. Although, these current day wimpy, I just spilled into it, wimpy, people in training, unlike Rob and I, didn't stay up for 3 hours at a stretch, nor should they, because these are the types of things that can really be impacted from a physical standpoint.
So we're going to jump to some practical things about sleep for pediatricians. I'm a bit obsessed about Broadway. Matt's more Rahway.
Jersey.
A little obsessed about Hamilton. So on the podcast, we do a little singing of this. But these are the 5 sleep commandments. Number 1. Now, these are if your parents want to sleep through the night as soon as possible. Some parents, that's not important to them. They want to get up all the time. That's their choice. And we have kids with cultural changes. We have a lot of families, a lot from South Asia that co-sleep, and it's against the AAP policies, but they've been doing it for thousands of years, and they're not going to stop. So we just try to make sure that if they're going to do it, it's as safe as possible. But if they want to sleep through the night as soon as possible, these are our commandments. Number 1, once the baby hits birth weight, never wake them up to feed at night, and don't let them sleep during the day more than 2.5 to 3 hours. Number 2, let the natural sunlight come into the day. They'll be darker at night. They'll get a circadian rhythm. Eventually, the last nap is done by 3:30. Number 3, no fixed rule on how long they can cry. There's crying, and there's crying, and there's screaming. And if a mother says, I can't stand my kid crying, then pick them up. You can't spoil a baby. That's up to them. We make that pretty clear that, we're not telling them when they should pick up their child. The last 2 are probably the most important. And I don't get that many compliments, but years later, these are 2 that people say, that really helped. And I start talking about this day 2, even sometimes at Christiana, the first day I see him in the room, we start talking about sleep. But as the weeks and months pass, try more and more to put the babies down sleepy, but awake a little bit so they learn to fuss themselves to sleep. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. We say in the middle of the night and you're exhausted, the kid falls asleep in your arms breastfeeding. Great, don't worry about it. But they should keep trying to see if they can fuss themselves to sleep. And the last one, try to get them farther and farther away from your bed as you can. The babies can smell the moms can hear the babies fart and burp and hiccup, but only if the mom is comfortable. And a lot of times I leave out the word dad in this because we're just mostly talking to moms, but no slight on dads. And lastly, and this is probably the thing that really got us to start doing our first episode, is when the AAP came out with their new sleep guidelines, which were great, but the main one is they recommended room sharing until 6 to 12 months of age. So we ended up doing a literature search, getting the 4 sources. There's 4 sources. One was a book that was out of date from Denmark in 1992, so we never got that. It was a book chapter. But the other 3 were articles that were case-controlled studies, which is not the most robust way, scientific way, all on European babies, all in the 90s before Back to Sleep was really established. One was BMJ, one was Lancet, one was J of Peds, and the evidence wasn't that great. The biggest one, J of Peds, the evidence wasn't there at all. It made no difference to room share, except if the parents were heavy smokers. And we talked to ourselves, we don't have a lot of heavy smoking parents. So we really feel that this doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't take into the cost sleep deprivation of the parents. If the parents are sleep deprived, they get more motor vehicle accidents, there'll be more postpartum depression, and probably more domestic and child abuse. And talking to our fellow pediatricians, who's an independent pediatrician out there, who's an office pediatrician? Agatha, you can raise your hand. You just retired, so you count. So do you agree with that?
With you or agree with it?
Do you agree with staying in the same room till 12 months?
No.
No. I don't think.
Dr. Honashine was not paid for that opinion.
Second commandment is only one, and I'll thank Colleen Cullen. Anybody know her? It's psychologist, but she gave a nice talk recently, and basically, there's lots of ways to do it, but just you have to have a routine. It's got to be some kind of routine for a baby. And then the third, teen sleep, which is a whole different category in and of itself, but the 5 teen sleep commandments. Number 1, smartphones never in the room overnight until college. You got to start talking about this in 4th grade or 3rd grade. Oh,
thanks for the foreshadowing.
thank you. Very early, there's a website called waittilleighth.org where you can tell parents to sign up. It tries to sign up everybody in a grade because it doesn't work when every other kid has a smartphone. At least it's much tougher. The average age, again, of getting a smartphone in the United States, 10.3 years, which to me is kind of scary. And also in the office, when the kid has a smartphone, I ask them for it. They hate handing their phone over. And I take their phone. First you look at it and then say, who's Kevin? Or something like that. And they get upset. They think Kevin's Instagram them. They're all on Instagram. They're all on Snapchat. They're not on Facebook because that's for old people. And you really got to talk about the smartphones. Number 2, no screens 1 hour before bed. It's tough with homework, and they say, well, I got to do my homework, but they're really going on social media at the time. And so just get it out of their room. In extreme cases, when they're going back and forth, you have to have rules, but sometimes it's this huge issue. Just tell the mom, there's this thing in your house that's vertical. It's called the router. Some know that, some don't. You just unplug it and take it to bed with you. Because the kids are better on the computer than their parents, but they can't get around the hardware being unplugged. So it's another trick we sometimes do. No sleeping in the weekends and holidays past 10 a.m., going to bed by midnight. This sleep shift is a huge issue for teenagers. And Matt had a really nice way to about after the summer when they're getting up at noon every day and you got to start school. And
yeah, so I had a family in my practice a year or so ago tell me that they will go camping the week before school starts. And camping and the type of a timeline that camping sets up for your family wherein it's getting dark and it's time to go to bed now really was a great way to reset their family's clock. And I thought that was ingenious.
So I made my family say I mentioned camping when I talk about ticks and they just laugh. So it's like, no way. Number 4, rare or no sleepovers for some kids. And again, I don't want to make their social life less, and that's a difficult one. But some kids just can't do sleepovers. They're not going to get a lot of sleep. Kids with ADD, migraines, anxiety, they can do late pickups, but you really want to tell them that might not be a great choice for you. And lastly, limit caffeine. Caffeine's the number 1 drug in the world. I mean, it's legal, and all these studies show how healthy it is. But for young teens, I worry about it, and the schools push it. I mean, almost every school sells coffee, especially every high school. And also, starting at 8:30 or later a.m., the AP's been behind this. Delaware actually lags around the country of having late start times. All right, I previewed it already for a second, but
yeah, so we really got into poop on our podcast. We have, I think, three hours worth of talking poop. So there's an awful lot to do when it comes to poop and to talk about it. So just to touch on poop in a couple different aspects, probably the most famous constipant in the world was this guy, Elvis. So, and his constipation was real. There was a book out a couple years ago called Gulp by a woman, I forget her first name, but her last name is Roush, that really talks about the whole alimentary tract. And she has an entire chapter just on Elvis's woes. And it's really quite a story. I mean, he had chronic bowel issues. He, on pretty much a daily basis, took laxatives and enemas. And his doctor, Dr. George Nikopoulos, who was probably also the guy who was prescribing him all his sedatives and all the other sundry stuff that slowed down his bowels, used to carry a picture of Elvis's colon at autopsy around in his wallet that he would very proudly show people, like, look, this is what I was dealing with. And apparently it was 2 to 3 times, the normal size. So pretty significant. Now, how Elvis...
But we also mentioned that the biggest colon you can ever see, everybody know where that is? You're from Delaware, the Mutter Museum. It's the coolest, biggest colon. If you got a kid, you got to bring him to see that colon because it'll make his day.
They're impressed. Yeah. So Elvis was known to have some, a cardiac arrhythmia, and so at his time of death, in fact, that was listed as the cause of death. So what presumably happened was Elvis was sitting on the potty and Valsalva, and of course that decreased the blood flow to his heart, and Elvis expired in his bathroom. So this story is true, at least according to Elvis's doc. So what about poop in general? I mean, this is the infamous dung beetle. So poop in general, engenders an awful lot of questions, at least from 4-year-olds. What's poop made of? That's right. Poop is 75% water. The other 25% of it is a combination of dead bacteria. That accounts for about a third of it. Indigestible foods and fibers, that's another third. And live bacteria and mucus and cholesterol and phosphates, et cetera, make up the other third. Why is it called poop? Why is it called poop, Rob? It's called poop because poop is a Middle English term. It was the term for passing gas because they thought that it sounded like it. Poop. So that's where the word poop came from. Why does it stink? Well, it stinks because there are byproducts of the bacteria, mostly sulfur and nitrogen, and that includes indole and scatol, appropriately named, mercaptans and hydrogen sulfide gases. Who has stinkier poop, carnivores or herbivores?
He asked me, so I guessed it right. The answer is carnivores.
The answer is carnivores, exactly right. Higher degree of sulfides.
That's why cow poop doesn't smell as bad as dog poop.
That's right. Indeed. Why is poop brown? Well, poop's brown because it's of bilirubin, product of the breakdown of the red blood cells in the liver, and more specifically, it's the iron in the bilirubin that gives poop its brown color.
So one thing we try to say in our hours of talking about poop is that constipation is not an X-ray diagnosis, despite what the ER seems to say every single day when we get their reports, and that getting FOS in a report doesn't necessarily mean that they're constipated. History and physical is still the key, and we still should be doing some rectal exams on someone who has classic sounding constipation. If you're not sure, if you do a gentle rectal exam, you find a wall of poop, you can stop and not do x-rays and other things and start that clean out right away. We did talk about how we thought we'd go into pediatrics and not have to deal with chronic constipation like you have to do in adult medicine, like the Mrs. Huffnagels of the world.
Who knows who Mrs. Huffnagel is? I told you that would die. Die on the vine. Yep.
Huffnagel. There's a lot of constipation out there. You just got to look for it. There's so much out there. There's no telethon. Perhaps there should be a telethon.
In fact, Rob and I were talking last night, and at least in our experience these days, if somebody comes to our office with abdominal pain, they're constipated until proven otherwise.
Or anxious. Those are the two. So you got to ask specifics about it. Every well visit, certainly, and certainly most sick visits and frequency, pain. And then the Bristol stool type. Everybody familiar with the Bristol stool type is? So I keep this in my office. And so I whip it out, and they're talking about not, pooping, and you ask them what their poop's like. I don't know. But then you show them the pictures. And I found this one because they're not usually coming with the different food references, but I kind of like that. With the most constipated, if they're going at all, usually the rapid droppings, the little pellets. The second is type 2, also constipated, which is a bunch of grapes, which kind of looks like Mr. Hanky the Christmas poo. This is the Christmas season. Everybody know that? South Park? Okay, we won't sing it for you. I could, but I won't. And then Jersey corn on the cob is the Bristol type 3. Not that uncommon, even if you're not constipated. And then what you want is type 4, which is more of the sausage shaped, long, and smooth is normal. And then the bottom 3 are more loose stools. I didn't make this up. The chicken nuggets, the porridge, and the gravy. We talked about Matt really likes gravy. But think about having that in your office. It's a real visual, and the kids can just point to what it is. And I think it really helps with diagnosis. A few other things with constipation, common things. Hirschsprung's is not common. I used to do radiology for a while and certainly always think about it, but it's not a common thing. In neonates, they call you and say the baby's not pooping. The first 5 things in your mind is they're not getting enough milk, and usually not enough breast milk. That's always the answer, pretty much. There's something called tight anal rings I don't see talked about much, and you get a history of a baby who's pooping every few days and gets very fussy, and then when they finally poop, they have a blowout. It's not hard, just a liquidy blowout, and then it builds up again over a couple of days. And if you do a gentle rectal exam with your pinky, you feel a really kind of tight anal ring. And you got to stand back because once you put your finger in there, it just explodes out on everybody. So learn that the hard way. And so you do that once or twice, and usually that solves the problem. You really don't want parents doing rectal stimulation all the time. And certainly you got to worry, make sure it's not short segment Hirschsprungs for that. And then sometimes using lactulose. Who here knows Karo syrup? That really dates us. Back in the day, I had a grandma the other day said, "Did you ever use Karo syrup?" I'm like, "No, we don't." There was some association with botulism, but it was not that different than lactulose, a very sugar-based osmotic constipation. Pear prune juice. We don't like giving juice to babies at all or young kids, and Matt talks about it a lot, but that's kind of the one exception sometimes is for a brief time using that. And Vaseline to the anus. But the main thing with all constipation is you got to get them cleaned out. You got to get them cleaned out. And Miralax is the best way to do that. We have a whole episode about the Miralax controversy, and we await the CHOP study. They're doing this big study at CHOP in response to it, but every study shows that it's been safe. We certainly try not to do it long term, but compared to putting a tube up your baby's butt or young child's butt and doing enemas for constipation, it has been miraculous for us to do a clean out. And this just talks about the different ages that you can do different clean outs for Miralax, and everybody's got their own kind of recipe, but you want it to be all liquidy and green at the end. If there's still big chunks, you probably need to do it again the next day. And I like to use X-Lax before and after. The chocolate, it's Senna, and a square, half a square before and after you do the clean out. And then you need to see them in a few weeks. You need to put them on Miralax or something for 4 to 6 weeks. They're just going to go right back to be constipated. Their colon's all stretched out, so you need to put them on something to let that colon get back to a normal size to get them to stop holding it. The problem is really up here after months or years of constipation. They need to stop thinking about it and just go. Talk about high fiber foods. Cheese. Matt has the cheese grandma.
Yeah, I had a child in my practice who I would constantly need to talk to the folks about constipation. They were complaining, and finally, in getting a full dietary history, the child spent every weekend over at her grandmom's, whom she referred to as cheese grandmom, because that's pretty much all she ate while she was over there. And once we figured that out, really we were onto something, we felt like.
This is the end of cheese grandma.
Yes.
And then, rice and benaziril constipating. And the retraining is the key. And also the older kids, parents got to talk to the teachers and make sure that they have a private place. A lot of kids won't poop at school because there's no doors in the bathroom at school, or everybody's looking in, there's no privacy. And lastly, this is a chronic relapsing condition. So you should put in your chart, like, used to be constipated, because it's probably going to come back, especially on vacation. So I tell my families, bring your Miralax with you, even though they're off it, bring it on vacation, because at Disney World, that's when you get constipated. You're going to be in the ER at 2 in the morning. And the pain from chronic constipation is way worse than from appendicitis. I mean, it's really bad. And lastly,
yeah, so we can spend, and we do spend, an awful lot of time talking about potty training in our office, and every child's different, and of course it has to be catered and tailored to their needs. You know, so oftentimes potty training becomes a difficulty because it's preceded by one constipation episode or constant constipation. And so one of the tricks that I learned in one of the throwaways a few years ago to get your child to potty train effectively if they're a little bit leery of the prospect is it's called the magic pull-up. And so, at least that's what I call it. And so so pull-ups are, as we all know, kind of this pull-on diaper thing. And so you have a toddler, and the toddler is a little bit leery about doing anything except for in their pull-ups. So the classic case is they'll go behind the couch and squat, or they'll kind of do the dance and the whole 9 yards. Check the Crocs. And when they get to the point where they're really frustrated with it, then you're just barking up the wrong tree. And so what I'll usually suggest to people is they take this step by step. The first step being like, cool, you can go in your pull-up, that's no problem, but you need to go into the bathroom, into the room that is the place where we go to the bathroom. Potty. So you do that for a week or two or so, and they get it. Okay, I feel like I have to go to the bathroom. I'm going to go into the bathroom to go in my pull-up. Then the second step is you keep the pull-up on, but you have them sit on the potty with the pull-up on. And so oftentimes kids are afraid of the whole mechanics of going, but the pull-up provides them with some degree of comfort. And that can be on either the little potty or the big potty. And note to self, because I always forget to tell people this, If they're going to sit on the big potty, it's absolutely unequivocally essential that they have their. It's really hard to poop, like I tell parents, with your legs dangling. So they have to have their feet on something. And then the third part, you can go one of either way. You can either then do away with the pull-up altogether because they've oriented themselves and they've made themselves comfortable with the potty, or you can cut the back out of a pull-up and still allow them to keep the pull-up on. And they're just amazed when suddenly their poop shows up in the toilet. And it's a great transition. It's worked very well for multiple kids in my practice. And it's a nice, at least, option for parents who seem to be struggling with potty training.
And we talk about how we're you don't want to push potty training, and we don't really believe in the punishments for potty training. But one exception could be with autistic kids. And there's a great article in the Contemporary Peds this year, a few months ago, on that, and about how the operant type of conditioning, with some consequences, seems to work well in that population, which is a really tough population to take care of them, who are 4, 5, 6, 7. If you can get that child potty training, it's a huge issue for the family. All right, shifting a bit to our first rant. We do a few rants over. Our first one was about Big Pharma and specifically about Mylan. Or they suck on Avenue Q, if anybody gets that. But briefly, Mylan makes EpiPen, did not invent or manufacture EpiPen. The drug in the epinephrine autoinjector cost $1.20. They don't make it. They have King and Pfizer make it, and they paid them $34 for it. They bought the EpiPen from a subsidiary of Merck in 2007. And at that time, a twin pack was $106. 5 years later, it was $250. 4 years after that, it was over $700. That's why Mylan got killed in the media, and it was well-deserved. Also, the CEO is Heather Bresch. She and her 4 top execs made $292 million in the past 5 years. That's number 2 worldwide of top execs in all of pharma. And Mylan's small, and they don't make anything new. There's no R&D that they had to do, no original meds. Heather's father is a Senator Manchin from West Virginia, and Mom was the president of the National School Board who pushed for the epinephrine EpiPen law back in 2013 to have EpiPens in all the schools. No one really realized that their daughter was the CEO of Mylan, of EpiPen, until later. They also, their suckiness, they did a tax inversion in the Netherlands to stop paying U.S. taxes. They got fined $465 million for cheating Medicaid. They actively block all generics. There was a big recall in March of 2017, and now the FDA is investigating the problem that they didn't investigate it sooner, and there were a few deaths involved. Their stock is down 56% since April, 26% since we uncovered the Mylan problem and controversy.
Related? We don't know.
We don't know. The market share was 95%. It's 63% and falling. One of our solutions is generic EpiPen, which is the old Adrenaclick. It's $109 at CVS for a twin pack. CVS doesn't pay us for that commercial, but it's $109. And there's also AviQ, which is obscenely priced, but it's free if you have commercial insurance, if you do direct mailing, and our patients really like it. It talks you through. And their company is a lot more morally responsible. This guy's the Edward twins, started it from Callio. They look like the Winklevoss twins, if anybody knows them. So we use that. Some more big pharma suckiness is, everybody know Martin Shkreli? I wish Steve Epps was here because he would love this. Martin Shkreli of the 5,000% markup for, I think it was a toxoplasmosis drug for AIDS. He's now in jail, and it's all because of Hillary Clinton, which is great. So he was indicted and convicted of securities fraud. He was out on bail. And then when Hillary was doing her book tour, he put out on Facebook that he would offer $1,000 for anyone who can get a piece of her hair on the book tour with the hair follicle attached. And the judge saw that, read that, and he put him in jail, which I thought was kind of nice. And a few other things, just random things we talk about. I don't know if anybody's experienced this yet, but Big Pharma and Big Insurance has teamed up with benefit managers to start requiring that we use brand name medications. And it started with ADD meds, Adderall, and now certainly Concerta. So I had a patient who mom was really upset because is on generic Concerta doing great, but then they said you can't use it anymore. You have to get regular Concerta. And they paid a $20 copay for generics, and now they have to pay $120 a month for the brand. and I have no choice. They would not fill the generics. And that's going to be happening more and more. It's happening on the adult side with some of the biosimilars, some of the expensive biosimilars for things like Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
Also, CVS is buying, not this week, United is buying the DaVita clinics. We like to say Blue Cross Blue Sox, although I didn't have a real Blue Cross thing. And then more recently, we got a nice nugget from Darren Francis.
Yeah, Darren Franzik let us know, and we had started to experience this. And as usual, I mean, on a Friday afternoon, some mom will call you about her child having ringworms, and it sounds like the right story. And so we consider going ahead and treating that because it's so straightforward. It's just one chewable pill, maybe repeat it in a week or two. And this used to be a no-brainer, you know, nice, cheap, easy, Vermox, mebendazole, $6 to $16 a pill. Well, all of a sudden, this disappeared from the market. And when it reemerged about a year or so later, suddenly these were $190 or $400 for a pill, one pill. So to treat pinworm.
And every pediatric journal has full-page glosses on Enverm, the new $190 to $400 pill for ringworm.
So what is really, you know, pretty much just as effective is over-the-counter, Reese's pinworm medicine, Parenteal Pamawate, which is about $12 for the treatment. And so we are now pointing parents in this direction because, of course, when we're doing this dance on a Friday afternoon, I don't know what your insurer covers. These other things are $400, you know, type of thing. And then they have to get in touch with their insurance company to check the formulary.
Plus, they shouldn't get away with it.
They shouldn't get away with it. And so we are usually now going directly to this over-the-counter medicine made by Reese, not to be confused with Merrill Reese. Eagles, unfortunately, had to change. We wanted to put 11 and 1. They're 10 and 2.
On the podcast, we sing the entire Fly
we
Eagles
do.
Fly.
You don't want to hear it.
You.
Yeah. You don't want to hear it this morning.
We added this one. It's going to be an episode coming up probably in the next month. And then there's also a Frenotomy. But so baby-friendly, sad mom. We have some neonatologists here. So everyone should know about perinatal mental health disorders, PMHD, including depression, 21%, anxiety, PTSD, psychosis, some comorbidities. The AP recommends that we screen the moms in our office at 1, 2, 4, and 6 months. Who's doing that? Who's doing the screening? Well, neither are we, although we've got the forms and we're looking into starting to do it because we probably all should do that. And we all should know the local support groups. One support group in this area is called the Mother Space. But we all know that breastfeeding difficulties is a significant trigger of PMHD. And in 2016, Christiana Care became a baby-friendly hospital. And they got that designation, which is overall a very positive thing. It promotes breastfeeding wonderfully. But baby-friendly rules require experienced Christiana Florida nurses never to mention formula supplementation unless there's a specific medical reason with an order on the chart. I like to call it the gag rule, and I got that line from the national website for Baby Friendly. On call on November 11th, on a Saturday, I did my scientific poll of 10 Christiana nurses, and 10 out of 10 did not think that was appropriate or good medical care. So I try to tell moms from the prenatal visits that their role as a mom isn't defined by breastfeeding. We'll do everything we can to support it. We have a lactation consultant in our office. Sometimes they don't go as planned. We'll just make sure the baby's healthy. I do have started to advise moms that in the hospital that the nurses aren't allowed to mention it about formula. And so if they want it, if they feel like they need to ask for it specifically twice and not to take no for an answer. And somewhat anecdotal, but there's so many mornings I come in and mom's upset. I even know that she's had some depression before. She's at high risk. And she said, I asked for it, but they wouldn't. And I advise mom that a little early formula once or twice, and it should never be routine. And there is risks of doing it, but it will not necessarily ruin breastfeeding or being healthy, and unlikely to cause nipple confusion once or twice, but it's much better to do a syringe than to actually give a bottle. And it may actually help breastfeeding. An article in Pediatrics in 2013 at some high-risk infants showed that early supplementation of formula in those instances actually increased the rate of successful breastfeeding later.
So we're going to touch on milk real quickly. So plant-based milk products are now readily available in the dairy aisle of your local supermarket. It's a small but a growing market. About 10% now of milk products are plant-based milk products. So places even like Starbucks and a variety of other places now market these. But the question really arises, I mean, how nutritious are they, compared to other things? So a recent study in last year's Pediatric Gastroenterology and Nutrition journal confirmed that the plant-based beverages really vary widely in terms of their nutritional value. And the authors of that study recommended that young children continue to drink cow's milk unless there's a medical reason that they can't. So an 8-ounce glass of cow's milk naturally contains about 8 grams of protein and about a third of the recommended daily requirements of calcium. It also naturally contains potassium, vitamin A, and it's fortified with vitamin A and D. And of the 4 most common plant-based milk products that were studied, which include soy, cashew, almond, and coconut, only soy has a significant amount of protein. The other 3 have no more than about a gram or so of protein per serving. And so soy milk does have about as much protein as cow's milk, but it doesn't have all that much calcium, at least in its base form. And many are artificially fortified with calcium. So when a drink is artificially fortified with something, whether it's calcium or whether it's a variety of different vitamins, et cetera, there's no clear evidence that that is as efficacious as its natural form. And the experts really disagree on this. Whole nuts like almonds and cashews are loaded with protein and they're rich in calcium, but the nutrients are almost completely lost, when they're processed into beverages, which contain an awful lot of water. And of the 4 plant-based milk-like beverages studied, the one that was determined to be the least nutritious was coconut, even with its added calcium.
And who here, we had a little quiz, we did it for ourselves, we both got it wrong. What % milk is whole milk? We all know 1% milk, 2% milk. So we got 4. Any other guesses? 3. I thought 3. Matt thought 4. The answer is 3.5. And lastly,
split the difference there.
This really hit me. It's kind of changed what I talked about families. Is multiple studies that come out in the last few years that low-fat milk makes you gain weight compared to whole milk. And in Europe, the first studies, and a big study from University of Virginia that was in Archive Disease in Childhood in 2013. And the theory is that over thousands of years of us using domesticated cow's milk as humans, our body has adjusted to that. So when our tongue tastes the milk and it's all ready for milk, and then when it hits the gut and hits the microbiome and there's no fat in it, it sends signals to your brain to eat more, and thus you gain weight. So in this study, at every age they looked at, obese kids, skinny kids, what's that Oscar Mayer hot dog, fat kids, skinny kids, whatever.
Even kids with chicken pox.
Exactly. Yeah. They don't get that anymore. But all of them gain weight on the low-fat milk. So now I tell families that, and I have someone who's obese and overweight. I know the AAP guidelines say that they should be on low-fat milk, and I tell them that, but I also tell them that a lot of evidence shows that, 2% or whole milk might be better, and a lot of them do that instead. But it's still not an AAP recommendation. Fist bump, a lot of disagreements about this. So I've started in my office to never shake hands much anymore. It's all the fist bump. And Matt does not agree at all. So I thought we'd first of all show you the 3 basic fist bumps in case you haven't known what they are. So the first one is what you do with grandma. And the second one with audio is obviously you blow it up. And the third one is Big Hero 6. Who knows Big Hero 6? Yes, the third one is and it's very popular. And why is that handshakes spread bacteria? If anybody listens to podcasts, something called Radiolab. It's a classic, and it's that, and to me, in This American Life, are the classics. And it's Funky Hand Jive with Neil deGrasse Tyson in April. Really did a great job on this, kind of the disgusting details they got into. But the fist bump, the Power 5, the PIB, which is pound it, bro, really the studies show, in the study in American Journal of Infection Control, that handshakes give 5 times the amount of bacteria than fist bumps, and even high fives, twice as many bacteria are given out from your hand as with the fist bump. So still haven't convinced Matt. He just says, he says I wash my hands. Well, I wash my hands too. But
to me, it's like blowing a kiss or actually kissing somebody. Yeah.
He said that, and I said, well, I'm not doing either one in my office. So.
Which is good.
So it's 8:52.
Yeah.
We have more, but should we just keep going?
Yeah, you guys take off whenever you want to,
Okay.
because the way we planned this was we planned to go through this entire thing and time it out. And when we got tired last night, we said, let's just wing it. Yeah, we'll see how far we get.
Right. Telemedicine, our second rant.
Yeah. So our original telemedicine interest really was engendered by the fact that we were frustrated with how things were going. DuPont had put out their Care Connect program, which really kind of flummoxed us in terms of the appropriateness of it. And so we actually ended up writing an op-ed to the News Journal last year addressing this because we were upset about it. And what it really comes down to for us, it's interesting. When we wrote the op-ed, we had the opportunity to meet with Roy Perjansky and express our concerns. And from that point on, the way that this is advertised on through DuPont is that it's available in Florida, Georgia, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and in Delaware only after hours and on weekends.
So op-eds do work.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they really do. So the takeaways from this really are that folks on the other end of the line, despite their good intentions and their willingness to make a living, really they don't have history. They don't have the capacity to examine a patient. So much, a lot of the websites, in fact, nearly all of them that we came across, will claim that they can diagnose things like strep throat, asthma, ear infections, et cetera, things that sometimes we're challenged by in the office when we actually have somebody
really
in front of us whom we've been treating for years. So we really just have a complete distaste and desire to fight against this entity or series of entities. It is being driven largely by the insurance companies. It's a cheaper way to go from a healthcare standpoint, but convenient is not good, at least not in this situation. And it's also being driven by our whole society of convenience. A lot of the larger employers are pushing their patients toward this option as opposed to actually seeing the doctor in the office. Again, plugging it as convenience, and to us it's just oftentimes unconscionable medicine. And so the AAP, won't read it to you, but this is what the AAP has to say about it. What really rings true to me here is the fact that it is the antithesis of the medical home of quality, in terms of quality. And we really very strongly feel this. This is really what our rant consisted of. For the sake of time, we will not go through it, but we do want to say that there is a time and a place for telemedicine. And that includes in an ICU setting. That includes in the transport setting. That even can include in a primary care setting if it's a consult that is more of a behavioral or mental health consult. Not that we don't like to see these kids, but sometimes with parents' schedules, et cetera, it becomes necessary. And I know that at least one of the pediatricians in our community is moving toward doing this for some of his ADD.
It's always Nemish, because
always Nemish. We throw him out there and see what sticks.
And again, we're talking about direct-to-consumer telemedicine, where they have no attachment, they have no access to the chart.
Yes, they're advertising to take care of your child after hours. Yeah.
Anybody been on hold for DuPont lately? They're like, it's 11 o'clock and your child's sick. What do you do? Well, you can call us. We're on call 24/7.
That's right.
But no, call a stranger through a phone.
Right. So, fire away, man.
Again, this is coming up, and since it's the right audience, I think, here. So there is a wide range of normal of newborn's oral connective tissue, a normal, beautiful array of life. There is a classic tongue tie with the anterior membrane. You see here kind of the heart-shaped tongue. Maybe 4 to 5% of newborns have that classic tongue tie. There was a seminal paper in 2005 showing that scissor relief of classic tongue ties helps breastfeeding. And we completely agree. We'll get to another paper, the Cochrane thing, but we see it. So there's no question that it helps, and it helps breastfeeding. There was a Cochrane review in March of 2017, which showed the quality of evidence for all of this is very low, that any tongue tie does not help breastfeeding, may decrease nipple pain. Of course, if you have nipple pain, you're less likely to breastfeed, so it doesn't make complete sense to me. But we have no question that there are times when it really, really helps. And I've seen since the mid-2000s where we usually use Lurafetto, that we would clip some of the tongues, and made a huge difference working with lactation consultants. But this to be lip ties, tongue ties, buccal ties, oh my, there's a lot more out there now, and it's confusing, and I think we've gone too far. There is the issue of ENT scissors versus dental lasers, and there's quite a few dentists who are doing laser frenotomies, input of lactation consultants, pediatric caregivers. In one study, there was an 866% increase of frenotomies in the USA from 97 to 2012. I think that's a gross underestimation of what it's going to be because they didn't even take into account the lasers and such there. So I think it's way higher than that. There's no studies. Any study they do now on tongue ties doesn't really define what an anterior tongue tie is and a posterior tongue tie. So it's really hard. That's what the Cochrane report is. It's really hard to know if it means anything. And that's the problem in this field. So everything's anecdotal. And nothing on lip ties, and certainly nothing on buccal ties. Matt had a buccal tie.
Yeah, I had a parent who was actually a lactation consultant herself, but wisely decided to seek outside help, but unwisely decided to seek the help of somebody who's presumably a world expert up in Connecticut about this.
By phone.
By phone, who was told that her child likely had a buccal tie. What is a buccal tie? I have no idea. So I looked at her child. No buccal tie that I could tell. Actually, even had him seen by a pediatric dentist up at Temple who said he had never heard of such a thing. So it kind of validated my 25 years of experience. Like, okay, I'm not crazy. There's no buccal tie. I don't know what you're talking about. But this is all out there, and this is what is being perpetuated to the mothers in our family. Last night, I mean, literally the last phone call I took, which was on my way home, a mom called me because there was concerns for a tongue tie. I've seen this child. The child's tongue comes very nicely over the lower lip, all the way out. No problems with breastfeeding. Everything's good. But she was told the child had a tongue tie, and was debating as to whether or not to have it clipped because the window was closing over the 2 months prior to needing more significant anesthesia. And I used the litmus test that I always use for my patients, which is really simple. What would I do with my own child? And I said, yeah, I wouldn't do it. And she said, great. That's all I wanted to hear. But we're dealing with this on almost a daily basis now.
And again, no evidence of improved speech or language or eating from frenotomies. No evidence of claims that behind every anterior tongue tie is a posterior tongue tie. So you need to do a laser, not clip. And no evidence about lip ties causing breastfeeding, speech, eating issues. In fairness, our lactation club, there's been a few kids with really severe lip tie going way down the upper gums that and when you pushed it back, it blanched. And so we did have that done. It did make a difference. So there's always some truth in there, but that's really the exception. And you don't need to flange your lip to successfully breastfeed at all. So takeaways, have a close working relationship with your lactation consultants. Frenotomies are painful. We get calls, the kid's really crying and in pain. There is a cost to that. It's not like, they don't feel it. $400 to $700 to do. It's expensive. So talk to your ENTs, laser dentists. I just had a phone call with our dental laser person. I said, it's going to change your referral pattern. If we send you somebody who we feel has a tongue issue and we do not feel has a lip issue, and then you end up talking them into getting the lip, we don't feel that's appropriate. You never would have seen that child if we didn't send them. And the parents feel a lot of pressure when a person's in front of them and saying, you really should do this for your baby, but it's not covered by insurance. It's an extra $300. So you should talk to your consultants. And this is a little one, maybe controversial, but for me, so a newborn rounds, if you see a mild tongue attachment near the tip of the tongue, not near the tip of the tongue, or mild upper frenulum, I tell the mom about it and tell her that we'll be watching it, but I tell her not to tell the nurse about it, and I don't put it in the chart. And if anybody who gets a consult, this happened a few times in a row, it stopped now, would go in the morning and the kid had their tongue clipped, and we didn't even know about it. So I think it's the rule, Christiana, now that anytime there's a ENT or an OMF consult, that has to be approved by the pediatric attendant.
Okay, we're going to skip earwax, except for to say the fact that Q-tips are a danger. There are well over 200,000 ER trips a year for Q-tip injuries, most of them from cleaning, and that comes down to 34 ER visits
34 kids
a day in the United States. Pretty substantial. Does everybody know what the Q in Q-tip stands for? Quality. It was originally invented by a guy who essentially put a blob of cotton on the end of a toothpick, and look at it now.
Leo Gersten's wife, I think he was an original Bowery boy too, back in the 20s. Not really.
Quite a storied career. Yes. All right. We're going to also skip ahead through the next couple slides or so and really get to the end. This would be a quick discussion on, which one of these is strep. The answer is neither. They're mono, but that doesn't seem to be the way that
urgent care doctors can tell strep without doing a strep culture. They're amazing.
Yeah, I just had an experience, and I'll make this really quick, where a child went, saw the medical aid unit doc. Yeah, right. Moans and groans out there. Saw the medical aid unit doc. Rapid strep. 80 to 90% accurate, right? Negative. The doc says, "I'm sure you have strep." Put the kid on medicine. 3 days later, showed up with this. Goes back and sees another medical aid unit doc. That medical aid unit doc astutely says, let's take you off the amoxicillin. This, of course, could be a mono rash. It most likely is. Or it could also be a reaction to the amoxicillin. But the first doc then gets the culture back, which they did not send as a throat culture. They sent as an upper respiratory culture. So it comes back with Pseudomonas and staph. So that doctor then feels compelled to put this child on 2 more antibiotics for 10-day courses. So now this kid's had 3 courses of antibiotics for something that wasn't strep to start with. And this is just a microcosm of what we're dealing with in the office.
And also remember that some people have both. It really is a real thing. If you think this kid probably has mono and the strep is positive, doesn't mean they don't have mono.
Right,
It's
about 10% do.
So if you're going to treat them, don't use amoxicillin if you think it might be mono. And just lastly, there's a bacteria called fusiform necrophorum, which is making a comeback, which causes severe exudative pharyngitis with a lot of pain. And it's strep negative, but it's treated by antibiotics. So there's always exceptions to things. So if you think someone really is sick and the throat looks terrible, it's strep negative, it's not mono, there could be a role of using antibiotics because that bacteria can cause Lemaire's disease, which is a pus in your internal jugular vein, not a good thing. But if you're going to use something, don't use amoxicillin. And that certainly is the exception of what we see in urgent care where they hardly look red at all and they're being put on antibiotics.
We're going to zip ahead to the most important part of
then
this lecture, which is the
on
vote.
that.
Yeah, vote ahead. These
Great.
these are great little tools that we have in our offices.
Anybody use scissors
We're gonna
to
skip
take
through
out
these.
sutures? Stop using scissors. This is so much easier. Your back will thank you 30 years from now. You just touch it. Bring it up with a forceps and just touch it, and it breaks off. It's less than 50 cents.
This is a great quick way to flush ears in your office. It's a dental syringe, actually. Originally in our office, we got them to help to facilitate moms who are breastfeeding to put their pumped milk in the end. Since it's tapered, we have them put their finger on the end and imitate a nipple. I find them to be fantastic to flush ears.
Shop locker, 66 cents, reuse it. You just press it on for 15 seconds. It really decreases the pain in the shots. It's easy, and it works. We just started using it about 6 months ago.
Suction of some type in your office is handy to have, especially for those foreign bodies. You can go anywhere from the $50 Frankenhauer suctions all the way down to what really is just a glorified tube like a Yankow or something. But it can really save the day at the end of a day when some kid has a pebble or a small truck stuck up their nose.
New adult guidelines, half you people in the audience have high blood pressure or are you going to have high blood pressure? And in kids, it used to be all secondary renal, but now it's all essential hypertension. And ambulatory blood pressure monitors, ABPMs, that's what you're going to be doing in the future pretty routinely when you think someone has high blood pressure. And it's really easy to do. And Josh Sharisky, just call him and he'll just set it up for you. You don't always have to even get a consult. Croup, we go.
We're going to walk right through this one.
And
keep going.
No, we're just going to say that we got to say that we don't agree with 1 dose of dexamethasone.
Yes.
It's 3 days because they bounce back, no matter what the studies show.
Yeah, we see a lot of bounce backs from the single dose of dexamethasone. All right, we're going to take a vote, and you can only vote for one. Billy Joel? Okay. Bruce? Yes, thank you. Told Rob I used to listen to Billy Joel when I was in 8th grade. But Bruce is truly the man. I think I'm bringing Rob over. He's going to see Springsteen on Broadway and really concentrating on trying to find out as much as he can about him. I'm doing my best to educate the masses in terms of Springsteen.
Mass family pet.
No.
Really quickly, so this is something that we did about Delaware. So when you're in a group of people, my kids, it happens to them all the time, especially when you're off the East Coast and you're in a group of people and they go around, they say, where are you from? So
Rob, where are you from?
New York.
New York. Oh, Broadway, Empire State Building.
Yep.
Yeah. Statue of Liberty.
Where are you from?
Yeah. Jersey, Philly.
Springsteen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jersey Shore.
Mm-hmm.
Diner, Snooki.
Right.
Tony Soprano.
Yeah. Lou,
where are you from?
Delaware.
Okay. Apparently.
Is it a state? Is it a total?
And that, my friends, is the Delaware pause.
And
Yeah.
we're going to skip over that we should not legalize recreational marijuana, and we're skipping over the school. And the last is the faux pas. So we talk about faux pas, most things that we did, so just two of them for each of them. Halloween, I just have to say the word Sarah Beth Walker. Those who knew her, she's the most wonderful lady. So she always tells the story that she was a resident in St. Chris, and on Halloween she dressed up as a clown, and it was wonderful. Then there's a code in the ER, and she went to the code. The baby didn't make it, and she had to tell the parents her child died in a full clown outfit. So I always remember that. So I have my three masks: the troll, the werewolf, and the scary. And I look at the age, and I go in. If it's a young kid, I wear my troll mask. When I come in, when it's a little bit older, a werewolf, and I save the scary for the teenagers. In 1999, I looked at the chart, teenager, walked in the room with my scary mask to encounter profoundly autistic 14-year-old with severe anxiety. If everyone knows Bev, she still remembers that screaming. It was awful. I still do it, but I'm really careful now about when I go in the room. So be careful about Halloween.
Yeah. Within my first year or two of practice, I had a young lady come in that I was really trying to be discreet with. She seemed to be a little bit on the shy side. So I was examining her abdomen, and she was lying supine. Tried to keep her sweater down, doing my thing, and all of a sudden this pinch on my finger, and I yiped back like this, and she looked at me like, "What's going on?" and really looked very embarrassed, only to find this. And it was the first time I ever encountered a belly button ring, and I never saw that girl again by her choice.
Now, when I do exams on that, and the mother's sitting there on her phone, not even paying attention, and I go do the abdominal exam, and then I like to say, "Oh, you got a belly button ring," and then the mom shoots her head up, and we all laugh. So I like.
Well, thank you
that.
so much for having us,
you.
everybody. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks.
Don't do it. There's nothing that says talk to the mother.
That's good for us to know.
Every,
But it's not on the website.
every hospital in Delaware. And to imply that we're causing. So, mentioned there's a lot of good. Apply the downstream outweigh the positive.
On the
A
other
little,
hand,
a little unfair.
a lot of nurses upstairs feel they tell
Strongly
us
disagree with
they
that.
feel that way. So
We
maybe
hear
that's a
from them every day.
discussion that should be had.
Sure, happy to have
But-
that.
but
Happy
very-
to be
very good
productive-
point.
Happy to be productive.
Probably
about it, but
heavy-handed.
there's nothing that
Probably
never
heavy-handed
talk.
for this, but good point.
I clarify that because there is a little nurses always not give recommendations unless it's medically indicated. The only reason for an order is if physician or medical wants baby to have formula, there should be an order supplementing breast. And the nurse should on her own. Oh, latch. You should give formula. That's clearly there is a perception among providers and nurses that what we're wanting to happen, not happening. Well, so we need to do better. I am glad that we're baby friendly, but it does be better to go to a better place.
That
where
does not-
providers
But
and-
good point by Dave. We haven't done the episode yet, so we'll
Not say
do that
that
way.
And
So we feel, but
Because
you're
you're
good
back
point.
from Big Pharma. A lot of nurses recommend you should hear back from Big Pharma.
Except for my patients who are in Big Pharma, a few of them. One is a Mylan person, so I don't really talk to her about it, but.
So they may eventually get.
Yeah. That's why I have my wife start my car.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.